Hello and welcome everyone on this official platform of Legacy IAS Academy. Imagine this, the President of United States of America boards a plane to the most secretive communist country in the world, one that America has not spoken to for over 2 decades. Cameras flash, the world's gasp, and global politics is changed overnight. That was 1972 when President Richard Nixon was in China. So as you can see here, even today, the bending to China, tilting to Pakistan is Trump taking US on Nixon course all over again. That Trump policies are looking like that he is following the same footprints of President Richard Nixon. But behind this spectacle lay much a darker secret, a brutal war in South Asia, a silent genocide, and America's backing the wrong side at that time, and all for strategy. So now fast forward to the 21st century, another United States of America president, that is Donald Trump, another scandal-ridden term, and again soft corners for China as well as Pakistan. Now the question here is history repeating itself? So in today's videos, in today's eye-opening episode, we are going to decode the eerie similarities between Richard Nixon's Cold War chessboard as well as Donald Trump's modern day realpolitik. So from Henry Kissinger's secret flight to Beijing's to Trump, flip-flops with Beijing as well as Islamabad, this story has everything: drama, diplomacy, betrayal, as well as big lessons for the future. So this is not just about the American history. This is the, you can say, this is the story of how South Asia was shaped and how it still echoes in Washington corridors of power. So buckle up, because what you are about to hear will change the way you see United States of America's foreign policy forever. So what is main idea of this video? So first of all, I'm going to tell you the most important thing. What is the main context of this news? See, today I'm going to compare Donald Trump's foreign policy with that of Richard Nixon, who was the United States of America president in the early 1970s. Richard Nixon, who was elected as a president of United States of America in 1969. Now, let me tell you, Richard Nixon, as you can see here, and Donald Trump, both were the leaders from Republican Party, and both have faced major scandals, like for Trump's Epstein files. Now, both had the both had a strategic policy but morally questionable approach to China as well as Pakistan. Now, they have chosen realpolitik. Realpolitik meaning strategic gains over the moral or democratic values. So let's try to understand their early times. So with respect to Nixon, so try to understand the early history of Nixon time. So first of all, in early 1970s, that is Richard Nixon historic visit to China in 1972. Now what happened? In February 1972, Richard Nixon visited China, a huge turning point. Why? Because let me tell you, China, a communist country, US capitalist country. Now US and China had no official ties for over 20 years. But this visit, when Richard Nixon visited China, this visit thawed the frozen relation and it helped change the Cold War geopolitics. Now, अब ये move कैसे plan किया गया? It is said that this move was planned secretly. With whom? With Henry Kissinger. As you can see here, Henry Kissinger was one of the diplomat, and he was also the most important national security advisor of Richard Nixon. Kissinger secretly visited Beijing in 1971, okay, to prepare the visit of Richard Nixon in 1972. Now the question here is, what was Nixon's strategy? अब Nixon चाहते क्या थे? Now, Richard Nixon wanted to balance the power between US, Soviet Union as well as China. जी हाँ, he wanted to balance the power between US, Soviet Union and China. So, in this scenario, he wanted to use China to pressurize the Soviet Union during the Cold War era, because Soviet Union was also communist, China was also a communist country. Now, in this scenario, he wanted to get help with Vietnam War negotiations as well as nuclear arm talks also. So, in this scenario, the visit of Richard Nixon to China was prepared. Now, Nixon during 1971 India-Pakistan war, as we know, in 1971 the most important war took place called as Bangladesh Liberation War, है ना? Bangladesh Liberation War. Now, what was the you can say what was the event, or you can say a point of view of Richard Nixon towards this war, you know? So what happened? So let me tell you, in December 1971, India and Pakistan, they went to a war over East Pakistan. Today it is called as Bangladesh. Despite US arms embargo, Nixon helped Pakistan secretly. Now, how Nixon helped Pakistan secretly? So let me tell you, Nixon allowed 17 fighter jets to go from Jordan to Pakistan. Nixon ने धीरे secretly क्या किया? 17 fighter jets को भेजा कहां से? Jordan से सीधा पाकिस्तान में. And Nixon 1971 का दौर है. During this time period, Iran was also the ally of United States of America. So they have now president of US, that is Richard Nixon, they have also used Iran and other countries to send the military aid to Pakistan. This was the scenario. Now, अब सवाल ये उठता है, why did he do this? है ना? Now, why did he do this? What was the reason? So, let me tell you, Nixon was afraid of India. Now, why Nixon used to why he afraid from India? So, the reason was he was thinking that India would break Pakistan apart. है ना? India would break Pakistan apart. That is why Nixon viewed India as a close ally of Soviet Union, and he believed that helping Pakistan would protect the United States of America's strategic interest in South Asia. So what is the moral problem here? This is USSR leader, India and USA. This triangle was there. Now what is the moral problem? Now try to understand the moral problem. And Nixon ignored this moral problem, and he has chosen strategic interest over moral problem. So during the war, Pakistan army killed around thousands of Bengalis in East Pakistan, which is called as now Bangladesh. That is why US diplomat in Dhaka, as you can see here, US diplomat in Dhaka, his name was Archer Blood. So US diplomat in Dhaka, especially Archer Blood, who was the US Consul General, protected this. है ना? And remember this thing, he protested. So he protested against the policy of US. इन्होंने कहा कि ये US क्या कर रहा है? And that is why in a famous blood telegram, as you can see here, in a famous blood telegram, they called US silence as a moral bankruptcy. इन्होंने बोला कि US Bengalis को यहां पर मारा जा रहा है और US शांत बैठा है. And that is why he called that US silence is considered as moral bankruptcy. But Richard Nixon ignored them. Richard Nixon ने क्या किया? He ignored them and supported Pakistan anyway. Now let's come to the Trump era. Fast forward to Trump era. So there are various similarities with Richard Nixon. Now let me tell you the most important. So Trump is also following the policies like Richard Nixon. Now, just like Trump, so Nixon was also accused of scandals. Trump is also accused of scandals, and Trump was impeached twice. Then Trump and Nixon, they chose strategic deals over human rights. Now, even Trump had a soft approach to Pakistan despite terror concerns. Though it can Pahalgam terror attack ही क्यों ना, but still Trump is showing the soft approach towards Pakistan. Now Trump is also having the confusing relationship with China, sometimes aggressive and sometimes friendly. So this looks like the old strategy again, so it looks like the old strategy that Trump is again following the old strategy. Now what is old strategy? Both Richard Nixon and Donald Trump, they followed a policy of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. This is the policy of Nixon as well as Trump. So Nixon used China against the Soviet Union. Pakistan helped Nixon to contact with China secretly in 1971. This was the issue. Now, अब यहां पर एक डिबेट आ जाती है, spectacle versus secrecy. So let me show you spectacle versus secrecy. Now what is this debate? So try to understand. When Nixon visited China, it was public, it was dramatic, and it was symbolic. And then his handshake, now try to understand, his handshake with the Chinese premier whose name was Zhou Enlai. He is Zhou Enlai. So his handshake with the Chinese premier Zhou Enlai was a global moment. But his support to Pakistan during the war of 1971 was secret and only came out years later. Okay. So this shows what? This shows two sides of Nixon's diplomacy. That there are two sides of Nixon's diplomacy. Now what are those two sides? So try to understand. First is open gesture, like visiting China. That Nixon visited China. This was the open gesture. Second, hidden moves, where Nixon was backing Pakistan's military. So what can be the final takeaways from this video? What is the legacy as well as lesson from this issue? That Nixon's China's policy changed the world order, but his support for Pakistan, जो निक्सन ने सपोर्ट किया था पाकिस्तान को, his support for Pakistan was brutal crackdown, which is still remains a dark spot. And Trump approach also looked similar. That means realpolitik over values. So that is why I would like to tell that this editorial, which is given on First Post newspaper, so this article warns that short-term strategies may win a moment, but good foreign policy should also care about the ethics as well as responsibility. So overall, we can say Nixon shook hands with China while silently fueling a war with South Asia, like he was supporting the Pakistan. And Trump talked though with Beijing, yet kept giving space to Pakistan also. So decades apart, we can see both the leaders, they have showed us that in global power games, morals are often first to fail. And what began as a handshake with Beijing ended with bombing in Dhaka. What started as America first brought silence in the face of terror. So these stories are more than history, and they are warnings also that real politics might win wars, but it can lose the soul of diplomacy. So as we are facing the global challenges from rising China to fractured democracies. The question is not just what America will do. The real question is, will it choose what is right or what is easy? And if this deep dive opened your eyes, make sure to like, share, and subscribe our channel Legacy IAS Academy, and tell us in the comment section, is the world ready for another Nixon moment, or have we learned our lesson? So until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and stay alert and awakened. Thank you so much.